I wanted to ask you a few
Some
questions
yeah.
about why did you decide to write about that subject?
The impulse or the compulsion to do it.
Prince Louis receives a title no one saw coming. But behind palace doors, the cheers quickly turned to chaos. It was announced with a kind of formality the royal family has perfected over centuries: dignified, composed, and almost forgettable. A line slipped into the court circular, a quiet post across official royal accounts. Prince Louis of Wales had been granted a rare historic title, long dormant since the 19th century. To the world, it seemed like a ceremonial nod to an adorable young prince. The boy who had stolen the nation's heart with his cheeky faces on balconies and infectious energy during parades was now being formally recognized. It was sweet, innocent, just a charming gesture, many said. But that's not how it landed inside the palace walls. Because if you know how the monarchy operates, you know titles aren't just decorations, they're declarations. And this one was loud. In the grand chessboard of royal succession and legacy, every move carries weight. Every word, every smile, every silence, it all signals something deeper. Behind closed doors, Queen Camilla understood the message immediately. While the public gushed over Louis's milestone, Camilla wasn't smiling. In fact, her expression told an entirely different story. Because the title given to Louis was more than symbolic, it was a statement. A quiet thunderclap heard only by those who knew what to listen for. The monarchy was choosing a side. Not explicitly. Not publicly. But unmistakably. The future wasn't just about continuity, it was about bloodlines. And with that single gesture, a new generation had been chosen. Not one born of compromise, but one rooted in legacy, loyalty, and deliberate power. Louis's elevation signaled something Camilla had feared but never spoken aloud. The Wales family wasn't just leading the monarchy, they were becoming it. While she had spent years cultivating her place, fighting the shadow of Diana, and slowly nudging her own family into view, this single moment undercut it all. Louis, barely in primary school, was now standing higher in symbolic stature than any member of her bloodline ever would. It wasn't simply about honor. It was about what that honor said. And what it didn't say. This wasn't a slight. It was a public reordering. A reassertion of lineage. A reminder that royal favor is never permanent, and that behind the ceremonial calm lies a ruthless battle for visibility, for relevance, and ultimately for power. Camilla didn't need anyone to explain it to her. She had played the royal game long enough to know exactly what this meant. The applause outside the gates rang hollow for her. Because inside, something far more dangerous was taking shape. But to understand why this gesture shook Queen Camilla to her core, we have to go back. Camilla waited decades for her moment, but she didn't wait alone. She endured the whispers. She bore the judgment. From the moment Camilla Parker Bowles stepped back into Charles's life, she knew she would never be just another royal consort. She wasn't stepping into a vacant space, she was stepping into Diana's shadow. The late princess had not only captivated the nation but had carved her identity into the heart of the monarchy. Camilla didn't just marry a future king, she married a ghost. And for years, she remained on the fringes, smiling for the cameras while absorbing blow after blow of public resentment. But behind that measured grace, there was always a plan. She knew her day would come. And when it did, she wouldn't come alone. Because this wasn't just about her. Camilla never wanted the crown for herself alone. She wanted inclusion. Recognition. A sense that her family, her blood, would be accepted by the very institution that had once labeled her a threat. Her children, Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopez, were never part of the royal machine. They were polite ghosts at formal dinners, names tucked quietly away in official biographies. They never walked beside George, Charlotte, or Louis. Never featured in birthday portraits or Christmas traditions. But Camilla believed that could change. That, in time, with patience and loyalty, she could move the needle. She didn't push. Not openly. Instead, she played the long game of nudging, suggesting, and encouraging. Her grandson, in particular, held a special place in her hopes. A child untouched by royal scandal, raised well, polished in manners and charm. Someone who, with the right opportunity, could be softly inserted into the outer shell of the monarchy. A courtesy title. A ribbon at an event. A seat a little closer to the center. But time, it turns out, doesn't heal everything. Because even after the public cooled and Camilla's role evolved, the line between inclusion and elevation remained. Charles, for all his affection, never crossed it. He was cautious, always mindful of perception. Every suggestion Camilla made was met with diplomacy and delay. She believed that after the coronation, things would shift. That perhaps now, as queen, her family would be extended a ceremonial olive branch. A gesture that said, "You belong here too." But that gesture never came. Instead, it went to someone else. And when it did, it landed like a betrayal. Prince Louis's title wasn't just unexpected, it was definitive. It was proof that the monarchy had made its choice, not just in bloodline but in allegiance. Her hopes weren't just ignored, they were invalidated. The long game she had played, the quiet moves made behind palace curtains, all unraveled in a single announcement. And in that moment, Camilla realized she hadn't just lost ground, she'd been erased. What seemed like a routine appointment to the public was a brutal rejection of Camilla. He was never supposed to matter this much, but the world fell in love with Louis. From the moment he burst onto the public stage with impish grins and spontaneous antics, Prince Louis became more than just the third child in the line of succession, he became a symbol. While George bore the weight of destiny and Charlotte carried the grace of tradition, Louis offered something raw, unfiltered, and deeply human. He didn't need rehearsed elegance or royal restraint. Whether he was sticking out his tongue on the Buckingham Palace balcony or giggling through solemn processions, Louis connected in a way no one anticipated. He wasn't performing for cameras, he was simply being. And in a monarchy that struggled in recent years to remain relatable, this kind of sincerity became a secret weapon. But what the public saw as adorable quirks were, to William and Kate, something far greater. In Louis, they saw potential not just for charm, but for continuity. He possessed the ease of Diana, a warmth that felt instinctive, natural. But beneath that sparkle was the discipline quietly instilled by his mother, and the unspoken expectations carried by his father. Louis had both freedom and foundation. A rare combination. So while the world smiled at the child making funny faces, the future king and queen were watching a different story unfold. They didn't see a spare. They saw a bridge between legacy and modernity. And they knew they had to act before anyone else realized it too. That's why the reactivation of a forgotten title wasn't just symbolic, it was tactical. The honor Louis received had once belonged to a senior royal whose name was etched into military banners and state documents. By placing it on the shoulders of a child still learning arithmetic, the monarchy wasn't being whimsical. They were drawing a line. A quiet but powerful statement that tradition would not just survive, it would evolve. That strength didn't have to come with age. That character didn't need to wait for crowns. And Louis, with all his untamed energy and magnetic innocence, would be the one to carry it forward. Strategically, it was brilliant. In an age where authenticity is currency, Louis delivered in spades. He was everything the monarchy needed to look alive again. Not stiff or antiquated, but vibrant and endearing. And while the palace made no speeches, and the announcement came with little fanfare, the move echoed across generations. Because in him, they weren't just raising a prince. They were crafting a symbol. A living reminder that the royal family could be dignified and delightful, historic and human, all at once. But while the public was enchanted, one figure in the palace was unraveling. She had smiled for years, but this time, Camilla couldn't contain the storm. For decades, Camilla had mastered the art of restraint. Through scandals, criticism, and icy receptions, she wore her composure like armor. She smiled when the public booed. She waved when headlines slashed her reputation. She stood beside Charles with elegance, convinced that patience would earn her a rightful place in royal history. And for a while, it worked. She went from mistress to consort, from outsider to queen. But beneath the pearls and protocol, a deeper yearning festered. It wasn't just about her acceptance, it was about her family's place in the royal structure. She didn't just want to belong, she wanted her bloodline to be seen, to matter. And when Prince Louis was handed that historic title, she realized all at once her waiting had been in vain. In the quiet corners of palace life, Camilla had held onto a hope that one day, her grandson might receive some modest form of recognition. Not a crown. Not a throne. Just a gesture. A ribbon, a courtesy title, a position at the edge of the stage. Something that said, "You are part of this too." And for a brief moment, when whispers of an upcoming title announcement reached her ears, she thought it might finally happen. She thought this could be the start of a modern monarchy, one that welcomed all of Charles's blended family into its folds. But when the news broke, it wasn't her grandson's name in the royal announcement. It was Louis. Not only had she been passed over, but the spotlight shined exclusively and triumphantly on the Wales family. Louis wasn't just given a title, he was exalted. Media outlets ran glowing headlines, praising the young prince's charm and foreshadowing his rising influence. One tabloid in particular didn't mince words: "Diana's bloodline leads to the future." That phrase hit like a knife through Camilla's years of silent effort. In one sentence, her family was dismissed, and the ghost of Diana was once again raised above her. She wasn't just excluded, she was erased. That morning, over breakfast, something inside Camilla snapped. The calm veneer shattered. As she read those words aloud, fury erupted. Plates were shoved aside. A silver teapot crashed to the floor. Staff froze as her voice echoed down the halls. "How can they humiliate me like this?" she reportedly screamed. But the worst came next. What followed wasn't just anger, it was raw, unfiltered pain. "My grandchild is just as deserving, if not more so, than Diana's murderous ghost, which haunts everything." The line was cruel. It was desperate. It was unlike anything she had ever allowed herself to say aloud. For those inside Clarence's house that morning, it was the first time they saw the Queen not as a polished figure of royal endurance, but as a woman betrayed by the very institution she had spent her life trying to conquer. Her rage wasn't about a title. It was about legacy. About being ignored. About watching her grandchildren fade into obscurity while Diana's descendants were carved into stone. And in that moment, Camilla realized the crown on her head had never truly protected her. Not from judgment. Not from rejection. Not from history. What followed next was a confrontation, years in the making of Camilla versus Charles. Camilla's wrath didn't stop with the servants, it reached the king's study. The shattered teapot was only the beginning. What had started as a breakfast eruption became a full-scale emotional detonation. Camilla didn't storm off in silence. She marched straight to where she believed the betrayal had been born: King Charles's private quarters. The man who had once promised her a place beside him, who had stood by her through public scorn, was now the one she believed had quietly allowed her family to be erased. When she found him alone, reading over briefings like any other royal morning, she didn't hold back. The air between them turned icy, thick with resentment and accusation. "You've chosen them again," she snapped. "Just like you always do." Charles, stunned by the intensity of her fury, tried to remain composed. He had known she would be upset, but this was different. Camilla wasn't just angry, she was devastated. To her, this wasn't about a title anymore. It was about being made invisible. About standing beside a king and still feeling like a stranger. About watching her grandchildren disappear into the background while Diana's legacy was engraved deeper into the stone of history. Every headline about Prince Louis felt like another dagger. Every public cheer for the Wales family sounded like a rejection of her own. And now, face to face with the man who could have changed it all, she demanded answers. But Charles, ever the monarch before the man, spoke of optics. He explained the strategic necessity, how the monarchy must project continuity and legacy, how the people needed to see the future anchored in bloodlines they already adored. He tried to assure her it wasn't personal, that it had nothing to do with her or her family. But that only made it worse. "That's exactly it," she fired back. "It's never about us. We're never the ones that matter." Her voice cracked not from anger but from grief. "Everything I endured, everything I gave up, for what? To be sidelined? Again." At that moment, Camilla didn't look like a queen. She looked like a woman who had given everything and gotten nothing in return. The years of waiting, the sacrifices, the isolation, it all came pouring out. She wept not just for herself, but for her children, her grandchildren, the life they were never allowed to live under the royal spotlight. Charles watched, helpless, as the woman who had once been his fiercest ally fell apart before him. He tried to reach out. She pulled away. And that's when it happened, not with shouting, not with declarations, but with silence. A fracture. Not loud or violent, but cold and final. A shift that neither of them could unfeel. Camilla, always the patient strategist, had reached her limit. Charles, always the peacemaker, now found himself caught in a war he could no longer control. And while chaos simmered behind golden doors, one woman stood silent but victorious. While Camilla raged, Kate never even raised her voice and still won. Amid the royal commotion, while teapots shattered and alliances trembled, Catherine, Princess of Wales, remained composed, silent, deliberate, and devastatingly effective. Her power wasn't declared. It didn't need to be. For years, Kate had mastered the quiet art of royal warfare. She had watched, learned, and understood that in the palace, volume was never power. Precision was. And in the weeks leading up to Prince Louis's sudden elevation, every step had already been made. Not loudly, not publicly, but strategically. The outcome was never left to chance. Camilla may have worn the crown, but Kate had already claimed control of the board. From the outside, Kate seemed like the perfect duchess, the supportive wife, the elegant mother, the poised consort. But behind those soft eyes and careful smiles lived a woman trained in discipline, diplomacy, and the long game. She didn't argue in public. She didn't confront raised voices. Instead, she planted ideas where they mattered behind closed doors, with the right advisors, during the right conversations. Months before Prince Louis received his title, Kate had already begun the quiet campaign. She didn't demand it. She suggested a conversation here, a reminder there, a soft mention to William, a subtle prompt to the king. And like water running over stone, her will reshape the landscape without anyone hearing a splash. She let William take the lead publicly. Always. He spoke for the family. He made the official calls. But behind every key move there she was. Not controlling him, but guiding him. Not seeking glory, but seeking justice for Diana's memory, and for her own children's future. Kate never forgot how Diana had been treated. Never overlooked how quickly the institution could erase what it couldn't control. So she didn't just see the title for Louis as ceremonial. She saw it as insurance. A declaration that Diana's bloodline would never be pushed aside. That her children would grow within the light, not the shadow. And when it worked, when the crown landed on Louis's young shoulders, Kate didn't gloat. She didn't even blink. The very next day, she showed up to a charity event in a muted dress, holding Louis's hand, smiling as if nothing had happened. But everything had. In that single moment, the entire royal power structure tilted, and Camilla knew it. The queen screamed. The princess had whispered. But the world heard the whisper. Kate's genius wasn't just in winning, it was in making it look effortless. She had become the monarchy's silent architect, shaping the future not through confrontation, but through conviction. Every move was for her children. For Diana. For the crown, not as it had been, but as it must become. She wasn't seeking revenge. She was cementing legacy. This wasn't just a battle over titles, it was a war of legacies. To William, this wasn't just about Louis, it was about loyalty to his mother. He had lived through the storm. As a child, he watched the crown bend his mother until she broke, and when it shattered her, he remembered who stood back and who stayed silent. So now, as a man, a father, and a future king, William has made one thing clear: the mistakes made with Diana would never repeat themselves, not on his watch, not with his children. In a palace that thrives on neutrality, William has never been neutral when it comes to blood. Diana's legacy isn't just something he remembers, it's something he defends. Fiercely. Unapologetically. And Prince Louis's title wasn't an accident. It was a message. One that cut through the noise of royal tradition and spoke directly to the heart of the monarchy's future. For William, titles are not rewards. They are reminders. They are deliberate symbols of who is honored and who isn't. Camilla may have believed her grandchildren deserved recognition, but to William, this was non-negotiable. Royal titles are not political favors, and they are certainly not gestures of inclusion for those without royal blood. From the very beginning, he drew a firm line. The crown is not to be diluted. Diana's bloodline will not be blended into history. It will be protected. That meant no ceremonial roles for Camilla's family. No compromise. No negotiation. And yet, behind his cool demeanor, William's resolve has only grown stronger over the years. Every time the press tried to rewrite his mother's narrative, he corrected it not with words, but with actions. Every time Camilla attempted to expand her influence, he quietly pushed back. Not out of spite, but out of duty. Because William isn't just fighting for a name. He's fighting for the truth. For redemption. For a legacy that was nearly erased by the very system he's now being groomed to lead. And he will not allow Diana's grandchildren and his children to be sidelined for the sake of appearances or appeasement. When the moment came to honor Prince Louis, William didn't hesitate. He didn't ask permission. He made sure the title chosen carried weight, history, and intention. This wasn't about boosting Louis's status. It was about positioning him alongside George and Charlotte as the true faces of a modern monarchy. One built not on politics, but on principle. The choice wasn't meant to insult, but it was meant to clarify. The future of the crown lies with those who carry its true lineage, not those who orbit it. And if that caused a divide, so be it. William's role is no longer just ceremonial. It's visionary. He understands that every decision he makes is being written into the history books. And he wants the record to show that he never wavered, not once when it came to protecting his mother's memory. Because loyalty, to him, is not spoken. It's alive. And Louis's title? That was the loudest declaration yet. And caught in the middle of this generational power shift stood a king aging too fast. Charles never imagined the crown would divide his family more than it united them. For years, he dreamed of this moment, not the chaos, not the grief, but the peace that might finally come once he wore the crown. After decades in waiting, decades of scandal, tension, and public scrutiny, Charles believed that ascending the throne would settle everything. That title, once earned, would bring resolution. That the monarchy, under his reign, could find balance. But as he sat at the heart of a fractured palace, reality came crashing down. The very institution he vowed to uphold had become a battlefield, and he, the reluctant general, was now forced to choose between the love of his life and the legacy of his blood. Camilla's pain wasn't lost on him. He had seen the quiet devastation in her eyes. The way her voice trembled with more than anger, it trembled with the heartbreak of a woman who had waited half her life to belong, only to be left outside the gates once more. She had stood beside him through the world's harshest glare, endured the public's hatred, and played her role without ever demanding the spotlight. Charles owed her everything. And yet, he knew that if he honored her family over the Wales children, over Diana's children, the monarchy itself would fracture in a way that could not be repaired. Public loyalty was not with him. It was with William, with Kate, with the grandchildren born from Diana's memory. And the institution demanded he protect that loyalty, even at the cost of personal peace. So when the proposal to grant Louis a ceremonial title was quietly placed before him, Charles hesitated. Not because he didn't see the merit, but because he saw the storm it would unleash. Camilla had been hinting for months that her grandson might be offered a ribbon, a small acknowledgement, something symbolic. But there was nothing in the plan for her side of the family. Nothing to soften the blow. He could have delayed the decision. Could have softened it with a joint announcement. But William had already made his position clear. His children would not be overlooked. Charles knew better than to open another rift with his son. He signed off on the title. No fanfare. Just quiet approval followed by a deafening silence at home. And that silence soon turned to eruption. Camilla's fury, her accusations, her tears, they weighed on him. Not just as a husband, but as a man who now realized he had built a kingdom on the illusion of unity. He watched his wife unravel and felt the edges of his control slip away. The advisors noticed at first his withdrawn demeanor, his cancelled appearances, his long hours alone. He spoke less about vision, more about burden. Because for Charles, the crown no longer symbolized triumph. It symbolized sacrifice. He was no longer the heir dreaming of change. He was the king, torn between two truths. That loyalty to Camilla meant betraying Diana's legacy, and loyalty to Diana's legacy meant breaking the woman who never left his side. He had tried to hold both worlds together, but the title handed to Louis proved that even kings have limits. One title. One child. But the message it carried would change everything. Prince Louis's title wasn't just ceremonial, it was a royal verdict. It confirmed what many had already suspected but dared not say aloud: the future of the British monarchy wasn't merely about tradition, hierarchy, or protocol anymore. It was about legacy, emotion, blood. And the public had made its choice. Not with ballots, but with devotion. The adoration for the Wales family had swelled beyond casual support. It had become something deeper, something generational. Every gesture, every photograph, every appearance from William, Kate, and their children now carried weight. And when Prince Louis was given that historic title, the world didn't need clarification. They already understood. The monarchy had placed its bet, not on the crown as an institution, but on the people who made it feel alive again. Camilla saw it, felt it, and despite the jewels, the ceremonies, and the official titles, she knew that nothing would ever shift public sentiment in her favor. She had married into the firm, endured its punishment, and risen to queen, but her family would never truly belong. The title bestowed on Louis wasn't just a moment of recognition for a charming child, it was a rebuke of her deepest hopes. A reminder that love cannot be inherited, and influence, once denied by the public, is rarely reclaimed. For all her effort, all her silent battles, Camilla now faced a truth she could not refute. She would always be the consort to a king who belonged to the past, while Kate and her children were carving the monarchy's future. And Kate, she hadn't demanded the spotlight. She had simply earned it. Through silence, composure, and clarity of vision, she reshaped the monarchy without breaking its form. Every move she made was rooted in purpose, never performance. Unlike Camilla, Kate never needed to force her place. She simply became essential. And now, with her youngest son standing at the center of a historic shift, her legacy was no longer in question. It was solidified. Not through scandal or drama, but through elegance, timing, and relentless poise. Her family hadn't just survived the modern age of royalty, they had defined it. Prince Louis, with his wild laughter and innocent charm, now carried a burden he didn't yet understand. But in him, the public saw hope. A monarchy not weighed down by old wounds or controversy, but uplifted by the quiet power of sincerity. He wasn't just Charles's grandson, he was Diana's heir. The living, breathing proof that a new royal story had begun. One built on compassion rather than control. On authenticity rather than arrangement. And the moment that title touched his name, the institution whispered something it hadn't said in decades. This is what the people want. This is who we are becoming. The crown may sit on many heads, but now, the public knows who truly leads. And with that, the palace didn't just crown a prince, it declared a new era. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.